So allow me to start with the first UML diagram. And this UML diagram that you're supposed to start with is what you call the use case diagrams. And I will share my notes here, but before I share some notes, there are things that I want first of all to clarify so that we can understand these things that we need to have. So I want to use a PowerPoint. Allow me to use PowerPoint presentation. So in this case, so if you're talking about use case, those are two words. Meaning this is something that has to be done by a given person, and that person now becomes that activity that is supposed to be performed by a person becomes a use case. So when you look at a use case in definition, we say it is a presentation of all activity. So the keyword is presentation. Presentations of all activities that are supposed to be used in maybe a certain scenario that we have already given. And I think I can give you a scenario. I think I have posted the scenarios that we'll be using. And this is the first scenario that we'll be using, of which we'll be having others. And maybe we try to interpret what we are supposed to have within the presentation. So that's why we are saying it is a presentation. Presentation of all activities. And if you look at these activities, we can sometimes call them processes. So it is a presentation of processes. And these processes, they must be performed by who? A person. This person is called an actor. So in our own interpretation, we must try to create a correlation or to create some relations between activities and an actor. We're supposed to make sure that now there is a relation between another actor, between an actor with another actor. We must always show the symbolic presentation of an actor and a process in this scenario. So in our own case, I'll use paint to define these symbols that are mostly used in these UML diagrams or these use case diagram. One of them that we have is an actor. And when you're using an actor, we always present an actor with a person, a presentation of a person. And then we have some processes that we are supposed to have. And these processes are supposed to be used in a given data presentation. And this is what we are calling a process. So remember, whatever we are having right here, it is not a rectangle. It is not a rectangle. It is not a rectangle. It is a curved rectangle. It is a curved rectangle. So at the end here, it is curved. It is always curved. When you're using now an actor, we are supposed to present an actor, the name of an actor at the bottom. We're supposed to present the name of an actor at the bottom of this symbol. At the bottom of this symbol. So in our own data presentation, we can say this actor is supposed to do a certain activity. And when he or she is doing a certain activity, you must be able to follow a certain process. So this is now what you call a relation. So here, we need to create what you call a relation. And when you create this relation, we can say there are different types of relations that we have in use case. And one of the relation that we have is what you call uses. So we have a relation called uses. So in most cases, when you're presenting these use case, we always present these relations with less than. So we have two less than, and greater than. So inside that, there is a relation. The next one that we have, I think maybe I can use PowerPoint. So we have what you call relations. And these relations, or the relationships that we have, one of them, we have what you call uses relation. Then we have another one which says we have include relations. Then we have another one which extends relations. So this one is not include, it is use includes. So in this case, we can now try to interpret which uses the other. So in this case, we use a dotted line, that like that, and this one still uses a dotted line like that, and this one still uses a dotted line. But now, the way we present them, that is where now we need to understand in that. Just look as an example, before we go to a certain example, we must be able to understand there are other symbols that we use. So one of the symbols that we have talked about is what you call an actor. Then the next one we have talked about is what you call processes. But when you come to the use case, we call them use case. And that is why we have already said the use case is now the presentation of the activities that you are supposed to do in a given time or in a given moment. Then after that, we have said we need to use some relations. And when you use some relations, one of the relations that we have talked about is uses include extends. Then we have talked about actors, where this actor, we have already presented actors using a person. Remember, we must present the way I have presented it. That means it is a person who is doing that. But when you are presenting this, make sure that when you are writing them, you are able to write, and at the bottom, maybe you can write customer. So remember, this is a customer, depending on the scenario that we have already been given. Then this customer is supposed to communicate. So this person is communicating with, remember this is curved, and I'm sorry, I'm not curving it the right way. Remember, I'm using some script or scripting. So in this case, we can say there is activity A. And when you're using this activity that you are supposed to have here, we use a straight line. So this is a straight line. There are some people uses with an arrow. It is not banned to use it, but if you use it without an arrow, it's still okay. So for this case, when you're moving from an actor to a process or an actor to a use case, we use a straight line. We use a straight line without the arrow, or we can use the arrow, but I would prefer we use without arrows. So omit this arrow. But the moment we use a relation, I think maybe I can still use a PowerPoint so that I can be able to interpret that. When I'm using an actor to an actor to an actor, we use dependency. We use dependency relation. We use dependency relation. This class is depending from another. Like now, I can talk about maybe a parent. Maybe we have a parent, and we have a child, or we have a student. Let me call it a student. Remember, a student can also be a parent, and a parent can also be a student. So it means it doesn't matter whether you are a parent being a student. So you can be a parent as long as the same time you are still a student. So it doesn't depend on that. So the moment we look at this, maybe we can say we are having a parent, and at the bottom we are having a student. So this class that we are having here, it is trying to depend with another class. So we present this, we present this with a straight line, but this straight line should have an arrow. So meaning this is a class called parent, and this is another class called student. But these two classes, one of them is the superior of the other. So it means you can be a parent and you are not a student. You can be a parent and you are a student. So a student derives some attributes from the parent. So this becomes a derivative. So this becomes the subclass, this becomes the parent class. So in this case, when you try to present this, and I think you'll be able to allow me to use maybe paint, or maybe I can allow this. So I can draw this. Then within here, I draw an actor. And when I draw an actor, I can be able to present this actor as a parent. Remember, this is now the way we are supposed to present this. Then in below here, we can now write maybe parent. Remember, when you're using this use case, we are not supposed to write the actor name at the top here or beside. We are supposed to write at the bottom. So that is now the time that you want to write it. So in this case, we can now have another class, and I will call this class maybe a student. So for this case, if maybe I can try to relate this, allow me to group these so that I can be able to copy them. It is not accurate as given, but you'll be able to understand. You'll be able to understand. Allow me to group. Just a minute. So allow me to group so that they can be together. So when I copy this, maybe I paste it somewhere here, and then I bring it here. So in this case, what we can see here, we have parent, and we have another one, we call it a student. So in this case now, we need to relate, or we need to create a relation. And when you create a relation, we move this arrow to this. So we have now created what you call a dependency relation. So one class is depending from another. Which class is depending from another? The child class, which is the student class, is depending from a parent, because we are saying you can be a parent and it is not a must to be a student. You can still be a parent and you be a student. So it means that relation, one of them is superior. And how we will be able to interpret on how we can be able to come up with an actor, because we can use nouns to do that. Maybe when you read a statement or when you read a scenario, we can be able to establish that using some presentation of an English-like statements, which defines a noun, and we come up with an actor that has to be given on that. So for this case, we have already presented an actor. Then this actor is able now to present some actions. And maybe we can say the action that has to be presented is maybe an action, and that's why we have said we use a curved one that we have here, and we can be able to interpret it. Maybe we say that we have some relation, that we are having that we are having a relation on this, and this one is connecting with this. So we say any activity that is being performed here, maybe if you are saying purchasing, if you say it is purchasing, so or maybe booking, let's present this as a maybe booking a unit. So if you look at now this booking, we can say this presentation that we are having, a parent book for an exam. So the same case, this parent who is still a student can book an exam. So we can be able to interpret other scenarios that we always have, and maybe we can say we have a client as a class, and then we can have a customer. So in this case, what we are saying is we have a client and a customer, where the client can be a customer. I'm selling Sukuma Wiki at this time, but now I can still be a customer in another organization. I can be a customer in buying fruits. I'm selling Sukuma Wiki as a person who is now offering these services, but afterwards I can become now a customer. So in that case, so we are looking at now a presentation of one class doing many other functions that are not within his or her premises that we always have. So that's why we are saying, maybe I can present this using maybe some notes that I have, so that we can be able to understand those use cases that I have already talked about. So in this case, just look at this aspect where we have the use case. So we are saying these are behavioral model. Remember we said we have behavioral model, we have dynamic model or static models that we said, and that's why we said, let us now, we moved from here, we moved from static, we moved from static modeling, then we are now on behavioral modeling. We are now on behavioral modeling. And when you talk about behavioral modeling, we have two main behavioral modeling. We have use case and activity diagrams. And that's why I want today, maybe we can be able to look at those two diagrams and be able to understand on how we can come up with different scenarios. So we are saying actions that are performed in a system, they comprise the operations. That is the process. It takes place within the system. Just look at the system that you are doing currently. Maybe you have a system, you have a proposal that you are writing currently, but that proposal that you are writing currently, it has different procedures or different functions that you are supposed to do. So how can you come up with a use case using the scenarios that we have, or using those different forms that we have? So in this case, that's why we are saying this use case diagram has various presentations or has various symbolic presentations. And one of the symbolic presentations that we have is what you call the use case. So in most of the books, they use these circles, or they use the oval, or they can use this kind of a presentation. So that's why I'm saying it is carved. But suppose we want to use this use case that we have here as an oval. So because I would prefer we use that. If you go to advanced, we can use that. So we use this as a presentation of a use case. And this is now the activity. Remember, I have said it's like we have a curved rectangle. And then after that, we can say the first use case that we have, maybe we can have the use case name. This is the pay bill. So we write it inside. We write it inside. Maybe we say this is borrowing. Borrowing books. Then after that, we have some actors. These are people who are supposed to do some activities in a given system. There is an element that performs a use case and which leads to an observable results. So this is a person who makes sure that this action or this process is fulfilled or acted upon, and there is an action that has to be given on that. And what we are supposed to note on this, we need to note that an actor is a human being. So note that an actor is a human being, is a hardware. So we can say is a hardware device, or can be another system. So we are talking about bank system. Then we talk about school management system. That becomes another actor. The whole of that. Right now we are looking at now, Equity Bank is able to facilitate or maybe to give some functions or maybe some activities that now the school has to use, maybe borrowing money or maybe sending some fees through the bank. So instead of going to the bank, maybe you use a pay bill, then you pay automatically, it reflects in school. I can see one of the, maybe the university that is doing that, when you use a pay bill, is able to reflect directly. One of them is a KCA, the other one is Mount Kenya University. So if you look at those systems, those are systems that are interlinked with other systems. Because when I am in a KCA or MKU, I don't have to go to the bank. If I go to the bank, yes, I pay, automatically I go to my portal. I can be able to see everything that I have paid maybe within 24 hours. So that is now a reflection of now presenting a graphical way of interpreting this But now that is the actor which is now performing that. And we can see now the actor has a graphical presentation, and this graphical presentation that we have is now a person. So this person is now presented somewhere, and this person is now able to do some duties which has already been provided to him or to her. So that's why we are saying just present this symbolic presentation, and we now term it as a customer, because there is a customer who is doing some job or doing some activities in that. So we can now try to create on how we can be able to try to interrelate them. And now we are saying we have interrelation. Remember, I have said we can use an arrow that has a pointed arrow, or we can use a straight line. So it can work. So for this one, we are having an association where this actor is associating with a certain activity. And this activity has already been given here, where this activity says a customer pay bill. A customer pay bill. Let me first of all pause at that point. And I want to go back. Maybe I use a scenario on a bank system. So when I use a bank system, there are things that we need. Maybe we can use bank system. And maybe there is a person who wants to withdraw bank system on use of ATM, automated teller machine. So when you're using the automated teller machine or the ATM, now what comes in your mind is you must look at all the processes that are undertaken by this person. So we can say there are two systems here. And one system is, maybe we can call it the DB, or the database system. We can call it the database system. Then the next one we can call a customer. Those are two people who are working with this system. Because when I key in my password, automatically it must be verified by the system. So when it is verified by the system, so remember, behind that now we can say there is somebody who is now maybe a clerk who is doing that. So there is a clerk that, who is doing that, but we cannot see this clerk. What we can see in our mind is the DB system, which is now verifying all the credentials. Then when it verifies all the credentials, so automatically we can be able to see the reflections of what we have within the system. So these two things that we are having here, we can now call them, these things that we have here, we can now call them actors. Maybe the name of a person, the name of a place, maybe the system that is doing that, etc. Then what can we do with this system? What can we do with this system? Maybe we can look at processes. So these processes that we are having here, and one of the processes that we can have, just a minute. So we can say this person can key in password. Key in password. But before we key in the password, there is something else that we have to do. Insert card. Insert card. When insert card, then there is another process, key in password. Then when you key in password, there is a verification. So password verification. So from the password verification, now that is the time that you can do what you call select, or maybe we can do some options. So which option are you selecting? One option that you can select is withdraw. Maybe we can have deposit. Maybe we can have transfer, etc. Those are few. But these options, you cannot do them together. You do one by one. But there is one option here. Maybe we can say perform transaction. Perform transactions. So we can say we perform transaction. But which are these transactions that we have? That has to be given out here. Then when you do this transaction, maybe print receipt. You print receipt, then after that, you eject the ATM. Now, those are few processes that you must work with them. And I still want to use paint because of drawing. Allow me to use that. And I want to paste them somewhere there. And these are the activities that we'll be using. One of the activity being key in password, insert card, verification, perform transaction, print receipt, eject. But who is doing that is the DB and the customer. Now, if you understand these use cases that we have, and then we understand maybe the actors that we have, the next thing that comes in your mind is now, how will you draw them? So, in the first scenario, we now come here and we start with the first actor. So we start with the first actor. Because these actors are only two, we can now present this actor somewhere here. So these two actors, one of them, we have customer. Allow me to use CS as customer, and allow me to use DB as the database system. Then there are some activities that has to be done here. They are not in order here. So how many activities? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have 6. Maybe we can have another one here. So this one is key in password. The next one is insert card. The next one is what you call verification. The next one is verification. Verification. Then the next one is now what you call perform transactions. Then we have print receipts. Then we have another one that we are calling eject. So for these activities that we are having here, there is one activity which is now perform transaction that has other activities that are depending on this process. And if they are depending, I don't want to go to that first. First of all, understand how we can be able to come up with a use case. So for this one, because we are performing transaction, we can create some relations. We have other relations. We have some relations. Allow me to use that because of space. And this one that we are supposed to have is withdraw. The next one that we are supposed to have is deposit. And the next one that we are supposed to have is transfer. So these are relations that are depending from this process. That's why I have already presented it using the dotted arrows. But that's why I'm saying I don't want to go to that extent for now. Where we are saying this uses this, it uses this person. So in here, if you're using relation, we use the keyword uses. We use the keyword uses. For this one, you use the keyword uses, and this one, you use the keyword uses. But for now, let us understand all the applications, all the activities that we are having, they are now within the PT. Now, the next question that you need to understand is now, how will you now try to interconnect? Because that interconnection is the one that we are calling interrelation. So for this interrelation that we have, we need now to ask ourselves, who is maybe keying password? Is it the system which is keying the password or the user? If it is now the user, we connect with a straight line. In that card, it is still a person who is now the customer. When you look at verification, the system cannot, the user, the customer cannot verify. So this is the one that is verified. Something to note here, and when you're doing a use case or when you're drawing a use case, I'm not supposed to expect it, is when you are drawing an arrow pointing to the actor. The arrow should not point to the actor. The arrow always point from actor to the use case. That is something noted on that. Then from this case, who verifies? This database verifies. Prints the receipt. The system print the this is perform transaction. This person performs transaction. And the same case, the system gives back the transaction. So those are two activities. This is one activity that is done by two people. One is the database as a hardware. The next one, or as a software, sorry. The next one is now a computer, a customer who is doing that. Who print the receipt? The system print the receipt. But who eject the system? Or is the system eject the card? Now, if you look at this, it's a very simple presentation of a use case. A very simple presentation of a use case. It's not a complicated one. But if you can look at this aspect, where we have a customer and we have another database, we have some boundaries. So we need to create a boundary. And the moment we are creating a boundary, we use a rectangle. So we are using a rectangle. So in this case, we can say this is creating a boundary from the outside world and the inside or the in-house world. Meaning, all these are activities being performed by these actors. So the system and the users, who are now the customers, are now within the outside world as that kind of a presentation within that. So that is just a very simple presentation of a use case. Unless there is a question up to that point, maybe we can proceed. Then we'll be able to move to the next data presentation. So I am maybe waiting for any question that you might be having at this time so that we can proceed. Is there any question? I'm waiting for a question, please. So I have one person with no question. Please, I'm waiting for other questions. If you have another question, please ask before I proceed to our scenario. So is there a question? Anna, Evans, Grace, Magara, Corinne, Teddy, do you have any questions? So please ask questions. Okay, so if there are no questions, please allow me to move to the relationships that we are supposed to use in this scenario. And I want to use the diagram because I had already explained them. And these are optional when you're using them, but it is always preferable you use them the moment you want to interpret another connection that we have within the system. So most of these relations that we have, one of them is what you call the uses. And we are saying there's a type of relation, a use case, utilizes the service of another use case in order to realize its objective. So we can look at now, there is a use case, maybe, and that's why I'm saying we don't use these uses. I don't know whether I had that diagram. We don't use case relationships in an actor. We don't use them. We use them in use cases. So if you find that now, like now in this perform transaction, if you look at withdraw, requires some association of these, or requires some representation of perform transaction. That's when we use uses. So we can say withdraw uses perform transaction. And that's why we must use with this left hand side. So we are saying withdraw uses. Remember, we have a dotted line and the arrow point to the parent. So we have part-time, perform transaction, sorry, and then we have withdraw. So this becomes a use case and this becomes another use case. So those two use cases, they are depending from another use case that we have within the presentation. So in this case, we can be able to understand that when you're using this use case, we have now to associate one use case with another use case. Then the next one is what you call includes. Use case must incorporate the services of another use case in order to realize its objective. Just look at now, maybe we have fees and maybe a health facility. For you to pay fees, you must, maybe I can present this using a use case. So suppose now we are having pay fee. Pay fee, and then we have health. For you to be attended by a nurse, that is an university nurse, you must pay fee. So you go with a card, then this card must portray the full payment or the half payment according to the university strategies that we have. So in this one, we can say this health includes paying fee. But when I say I want to go to the hospital, but I don't want to use pay fee, that you cannot use that as an include. So the moment we use include is when you are referring to a use case that must depend from another class, but it must depend from it so that it can fulfill its objectives. So that's why we are saying when you pay fee, you are now mandated to go to the hospital and you are supposed to be treated any disease that we have in that hospital, if it can be able to do that. So in this case, include is part of the inclusive of what you call the relationship that we have. Extend this means we are inheriting. There are some things that we are inheriting. So use case inherit or extends the services of another use case. So if you can look at this, use extends and use case is somehow related because the service of another use case in order to realize its objective. So we are looking at now, it uses another class to realize its objective. So for this case, if you use include, we must look at, extends. We are looking at where we have a class shape extends triangle. So triangle cannot perform any duty if it has not been defined in the shape. So you must define it in the shape so that it can have its own representation of that data. Then we have generalization. I think I talked about generalization is when you combine all the forms together from top to bottom, and you'll be able to perform the function that we have. So we'll be using these relations depending on the scenario that we have already been given, or depending on what we have been given. And for now, I want us maybe to first of all understand how we can be able to write, or maybe come up with a structure, or come up with this data representation, or come up with this use case, being given a certain scenario. And that's why I want to switch directly to the scenarios that I have. And if you can see the scenario that I have already displayed, you can see, I hope you are seeing that scenario and it is clear. So allow me to maybe expand it. Let me use, maybe I remove the italic, the italicized. Then maybe I can use some spacing here so that, okay, it is okay. So this is the scenario that we are having here. This is the scenario that we are having. And this is the standard of scenario. The start of the scenario below concerning ZTech main library. Required, identify the main actors in the scenario. Draw a use case diagram based on the given scenario. And the scenario is this. So the first thing is to identify how many actors do we have. That is the first thing. So we come up with actors. So the first thing is to come up with actors. And which are these actors that you are having? So you read the scenario, you try to interpret the scenario, then come up with these actors. The library must keep track of the books. Read slowly. Read slowly. So we can define this as an actor, and maybe I can use a table. Allow me to use a table, if you won't mind. So allow me to use that table. This one, I call it an actor. So first of all, you start by drawing a scenario in a design. Then we can look at use case or use cases. So the first actor, which is the first actor? Read the scenario. I will read the scenario first without looking at which is the actor or not. The library must keep track of the books as they are purchased, cataloged in the library, circulated to library users, and those are the patrons, and eventually discarded when they wear out. Patrons have access to the library catalog to search the book catalog and to see whether the book is available. A patron can also reserve a title if all copies are checked out. Patrons can get a book on a loan, and a circulation clerk will help them to do this by running a checkout procedure. The circulation clerk checks books in once these are returned. The stocking clerk keeps track of the arrival of the new books and enters the title into the library catalog. The library manager has their own activities. They need to print out reports of the book's title by the category. They also like to see what books are on the reserve and what books are overdue. When the book gets damaged or destroyed, the manager deletes the record for the copy of the book from the catalog. That is just a scenario. And now we can start interpreting it. I don't know whether we will use this method of maybe somebody reading it and maybe understanding, but for now we can interpret together the scenario. So the library must keep track of the books they are purchased. The library must keep track of the books as they are purchased. So in this case, we have a system that we are calling a library. as an actor. But this library, it is used to keep track. I use short forms, keep track of books purchased, cataloged in the library, circulated to the library users. So we have another actor who is called users. And these are the ones that we are calling patrons. And eventually, so a library must keep track of the books as they purchased, catalog in the library, circulate to the library users, and eventually discard when they wear out. So in this case, we are looking at this system has other functions. So the next one that we have is now circulate to users. The next one that we have is now discard. Discard. So this person, this system or the library is discarding. Patrons have access to library catalog to search the books. So this patron searches books, from the catalog. I know you have already used the catalog when you're using the system in your libraries. The patron can also, patrons have access to the library catalog to search the book's catalog and to see whether the book is available. So when you're looking at this, we need to look at the availability of the book, availability or non-availability. So these are two use cases. So these are two functions that are depending from the search. So you can now try to come up with what you call uses presentation. Patrons have access to library catalog such that, okay, a patron can also reserve a title. So we have another one. So reserve titles. So this one is one. Maybe we can use dots to represent different scenarios. Then we have another one, which is this. So we have this, searches, reserves. Then we can still continue reading. The patron can also reserve a title if all copies are checked out. So we look at copies checked out. So you reserve the titles if checked out. Patrons can get a book on a loan. So this patron gets a book. Get a book. And this one, you are getting through a loan. You're getting through a loan. Patron can also reserve a title if all copies are checked out. Patrons can get a book on a loan, and a circulation clerk will help them to do this by running a checkout procedure. So we have another person who you are calling a clerk or circulation clerk. So we have circulation clerk, and allow me to use short forms. Checks out books. Checks out books. Then from there, a patron can get a book on their own, and the circulation clerk will help them to do this by running a checkout procedure. So here we are hiding the procedure for that checking out because we are assuming that this is only done by the circulation clerk. The circulation clerk checks the books in once these are returned. So here you check in books. Checks in books. The stocking clerk keeps track of arrival. So this is another person whom we are calling the stocking clerk. Those are two different people. Stocking clerk. But this stocking clerk keeps track, so we can say keep track of arrival of new books. Of arrival of new books. Keeps track of arrival of new books. And then what does he do again? Arrival of new books and enters the title in the library catalog. So here, enters title. Enter title. The library manager, here we have another one. So we have the library manager. So the library manager does what? So we can say the library manager has their own activity. They need to print out report of book title by category. So print out the report. Print out the report. So we can use that. Maybe we have other activities that this person is supposed to do. So print out the report of the titles. They also like to see what the books are on the reserve and what books are overdue. So we can look at now books are on the reserve and the overdue, sorry. So we can have that. So checks books that are overdue. When the book gets damaged or destroyed, the manager deletes the record for what copies of a book from the catalog. So this person still, he is an overall of deleting the books. So after we do that, already we have the actors and we have the use cases. So if you can look at the first person, keeps the track, circulate to the users, discard. So when you discard this book, so it means this person has mandate of deleting. So this person has a mandate of deleting the book. Has a mandate of deleting a book. So we can say this person, the library, the system itself deletes because now the manager has already done this. We can still look at now, keep track of the books purchased, circulated to the users. Who does that? Check out the books, check in the books, it's okay. Searches books from the catalog, etc. So from this scenario, we can be able to look at now how we can be able to give out, or maybe you can be able to come up with what you call the data presentations. And that is why we need to use this scenario. And I'll leave it the way it is. Maybe I'll leave it the way it is. The moment you are reading your notes, you will be able now to draw this, and I want to see it. Maybe next time you will be able to draw it to come up with a clear one, maybe given some presentation of this scenario that we have. So I would like maybe you ask a question before we proceed, because I might be talking and maybe we are not in the same page. We might be talking, but we are not in the same page. Any question up to that point, please? So do you have any other question? So I have already received maybe a communication from Doreen. I have received a communication from Doreen. Others? Anna, do you have any question? Evans? Evans, do you have any question? Grace? Magara Kefa? Corinne, do you have any question? Teddy, do you have any question? Okay, so I think we are in the same page. Because of maybe the diagram, because I have already presented the diagram for this scenario, I would like maybe you take your time and draw this use case that we have here, that I have already given out here, and try to come up with a given presentation like this. And allow maybe we can still use what you call the boundaries. Make sure that you have boundaries to separate the external and internal services of a given project that we have. So I want to go directly. I want to go directly to the activity diagram, which is another part of which is another part of what you call the behavioral diagrams. And within these behavioral diagrams that we have, maybe we can be able to understand these activity diagrams. And they work the same as the use case, but now what changes is now how we should be able to present these. So in this, we are looking at now the flow of activity from one point to another. How do this activity flow? If you look at maybe the presentation, like now, just look at now the moment you wake up, which activity do you start with? So I always start with maybe praying God, or maybe I wake up and I go outside there, or maybe I go to school, then I come to bathe. Maybe those are the procedure. But I don't think that we can be able to understand here. These are the procedure that we can do without looking at there is activity that is superior than the other. We are looking at that scenario, making sure that these activities are performed, but there is only one activity which cannot be performed before the other. If you perform it before the other, now that is not a clear processing. Like just look at an example. Maybe when you wake up, what do? I wake up, I bathe, maybe. Then after that, maybe we take tea or you take breakfast. Then after that, you take the bag, you go to a bus station, then you go to school. But we cannot say we wake up, then we go to school, then we come to the bus station. Those are activities that has to follow each other. So that's why we are saying activity works the same as the use case. But now if you can get the difference between the use case is that use case doesn't follow a procedure. It doesn't follow a procedure. But an activity follows. Activity follows. When you look at now in use case is easy to implement. But on the other side, this is not easy to implement. So you look at now, we have some challenges in implementing the activity diagram. And when you are implementing this diagram, we look at now the operations which are supposed to be done. So in some books, we call them workflows. And these are the ones that we are saying workflows are the interaction of the automated system, human actors, and different organizations. So here we can say is easy is easy, but not easy. look at these activities, so if you look at the activities that you're supposed to perform, we need to understand that these workflows that we are having. Okay, I have a question here. I did not get what you said, that use case does not follow procedure, but activities does. Okay, in this case, Pauline, what I'm saying is, if you look at the use case that we have already come up with, we don't know which start with this, with what. So if you keep key in password, we don't start with key in password. We start with insert card. So when you use an activity diagram to organize them, first of all, we insert card. Then after that, we key in password. Then the next one, we verify. So that's why I'm saying when you're using a use case, there is no there is no procedure followed when you are laying out these activities or these processes. But the moment we are using a use case, an activity diagram, we must follow a certain procedure. Meaning, this activity cannot be done if, or this activity 3 cannot be done if activity 1 and 2 has not been done. Activity 1, activity 2 depend on activity 1. Activity 3 depend on activity 1 and activity 2. So that is what we are saying in that scenario. So in this case, I think maybe I have communicated that. Have I communicated that, Pauline? Or can I repeat? Is there any question? Maybe can I repeat? Pauline? Pauline is offline. Yes, Pauline? Okay, it's understood. Okay, so what we are saying is, let me go back to these differentiations that we have here. We have said use case does not follow procedure, but an activity diagram. Allow me to use these. I'm sorry for the typing error, but activity diagrams follows. Use case is easy to implement, but when you use an activity, it is not easy, because if you omit a certain activity, that model will not work. It's like now we are coming up with Vika Superhighway, and then we omit maybe a certain diversion. Automatically, will you be going to town, then you come back to that diversion so that we can move to that direction. So we look at that point now, you need to look at a clear model that you can be able to come up with. When you still use what you call the use case, in terms of data presentation, use case and activities and activity, it has a clear presentation. You can see who is doing this. You can see the clear flow of the information. And that's why we are saying in use case, we don't combine activities. We split them. But in the activity diagram, you can combine them. Remember, if you look at this question that we were doing here, we were looking at perform transaction. But we said we must introduce the other activities here. And we are not combining them. So we must introduce them, and we use case, or we use. But when we talk about the activity diagram, we look at the general approach. This is a human being who is demonstrating a certain activity. That is now demonstration. Demonstration has demonstrating maybe procedure of cooking, demonstrating the procedure of movement, demonstrating the procedures of the reading. So all these are being performed in one presentation. So that's why we say we combine activities. We combine activities in activity diagram. In activity diagram, but we split activities in the use case. We split the activities in use case. So if you can be able to understand those differentiations, Now we are okay. So for the procedure, I think it has been explained here. Activities are therefore used to show both the sequential, that is the procedure, as well as given in your notes, as well as concurrent flow of activities in a system. So you can show all the activities that are done at the same time, but in use case, you cannot show all the activities that are done at the same time. That is one disadvantage still we have. Activities that are done in an activity diagram, you can show them concurrently, how they are being performed concurrently. And I think you understand what is the meaning of the word concurrent, because concurrent means you can perform this as you perform another one. Maybe I can withdraw money at the same time. Maybe I can be doing some balance, maybe looking at the balance, maybe looking at the message that is coming on my phone through the system. Maybe it is sending, and then the system is now resulting on giving out the output on a mobile phone. An activity results in some actions, which leads to changes in state. So we are looking at now which changes. So that's why we are saying they must follow procedure, because the procedure 1 now determine whether we will have procedure 2. The procedure 2 determine whether we will have procedure 3. So if procedure 3 is not complete, now automatically procedure 3 will not be given out. So we must always make sure that the activities are done the way they are supposed to be done. I want to go directly to these shapes that we always have, and allow me to use paint again for me to draw this and to explain. If you look at the first one, we always use a start. It is a circle, but inside that circle, maybe I can use, it is a small circle, but inside that small circle, it is dotted. Then we have an arrow. This means is the start. Then we have another one, which start with an arrow and then end with a circle. But we can still have another circle inside, but it is dotted. We have we have a bigger circle which is not dotted or shaded, but we have an inner circle which is shaded. This means it is end of an activity. Then we can have another one, which we form what you call join. Join. These are activities. So we can have activity 1, activity 2, and activity 3. So this activity that is here is the one that is resulting to activity A, B, C, D. Maybe option. If I look at the question of banking, we take option. We take option. And the option was perform transaction. So perform transaction allows you to withdraw, allows you to deposit, and allows you to transfer. And these ones, we use rectangle, but this rectangle is a curved rectangle. It is a curved rectangle. So in this case, we can say this activity that is here. So this forms what you call join. And this bar is what you call synchronization bar. And that's why we are saying we do this activity, we can do this activity, but this activity can be done at the same time. If you look at these notes that we have here, this is the shape that we are saying start. But if I look at the diagrams that I have here, they are not clearly drawn, because if you look at this shape, inside it, we have a shaded one, means end. That is the final state. Then we have activities that we have. Then we have decision. And I think this one is not new to you, because when you look at decision, we are looking at now alternatives. So either do one alternative, you do one activity, or if it fails, you do the other one. And then we can be able to complete with that. And that's why we have what we call the condition card. So we have yes or no. Then we have the flow which is defined with a straight arrow. And then we have what you call the join and the fork. So I'm sorry for this. This was supposed to be fork. I'm sorry. So this is the fork. This is the fork. But now, if you change this, you have activity 1, you have another activity, and you have another activity here, and we have a synchronization bar. But this synchronization bar, now when you combine this synchronization bar, forms one activity. So many activity forming other activity. This is the one that we are calling join. This one is now the one we call fork. So one activity distributing to multiple activities. Many activity distributing to only one activity. Maybe withdraw, deposit, transfer. At the end, you must print the receipt. So that one can be termed as what you call the join. So this is one that we are calling synchronization. Synchronization bar. Synchronization bar. And if you look at these notes that we have, we are saying we have the synchronization bar, where this is now the synchronization, this line. And there's some things that we need to look at, because these are diagrams that we need to use when you are presenting our baby scenarios. Remember, make sure that you understand these diagrams. And when you understand them, you'll be able now to understand on how we can be able to draw these, following some procedural way here. And these are now the rules. Activity diagram has an initial state of which we have already defined them, because now we are looking at these diagrams the way they are supposed. So you cannot have an end when you don't have a start. You must have a transition, movement from one point to another, but we cannot say we are ending if you don't have transitions. So those transitions that we have now forms the end, the presentation of what we need to have within the scenarios. I can use the simple presentation here, which now we are saying we can still use the ATM, the transaction of ATM, maybe preparing and serving coffee. Now, when you are preparing and serving coffee, maybe what are we supposed to do? When you're using the ATM transaction, what are we supposed to do? Remember, we had started with the ATM. Maybe I can use the ATM. So for this case, maybe we can remember. So the first one, we need to start. When you start, what are the activities that are supposed to be performed? So you can maybe say that here, maybe we are doing something, of which we'll come to that. So the first thing is to insert. Insert card. Insert card. Then when you insert card, what are we supposed to do afterwards? So you can enter password. Enter password. So after entering password, what else are you supposed to do? Now, remember, this password might be having two options. One, it is either correct or it is not correct. So you can have a decision. So if this password is correct, if this one is false, so maybe if this one is false, maybe what else can we do? Maybe we can go back and we enter this password. So if you can look at this diagram, it's like a flowchart diagram. It's like a flowchart. For this case, if it is now correct, if it is true, what else can you do? So here we are looking at now the system verifies, verification. So when you verify, what else can you do? So allow me to start at the top, but it is a continuation. What else can you do? So in this case, you can do some activities. One of them, you can do what you call withdraw. So I can use withdraw. I can have another one. deposit. Maybe I can have another one. I can have another one, which is now transfer. But these ones, they must form one activity. So which is this activity that you are forming? So you form one activity, and this activity is now what you call print receipt. Then after you print receipt, what are we supposed to do? You eject the card. Remember, these rectangles are curved at those four corners that we have. Then after that, we can do what you call add. That is very easy to implement still, but somehow complicated if you don't know how the activities are supposed to be portrayed within the presentation. Are we getting what we are drawing here? Sorry, are we getting what we are drawing? Are we getting? Okay, there is a question here whether we are supposed to use connectors. We can still use connectors, Kefa, and that one is even good when I use it somewhere here. I use it somewhere here, then I do away with this line. Maybe let me rub this line. I can rub this line. Maybe if you are moving to the next line or to the next page, so instead of drawing like that, we can use that connector, and here we present a line like that, and here we use this connector. So for this case, we use this connector, a very small one. It is optional. We don't have any issue when you're using it. It is optional. You can use it, or we use it the way I have used it. So there is no harm. No harm when you're using that. So I hope I have responded to that, Kefa. Okay, do we have any question? Do we have any question? Do you have any question? Okay, do you have any question? Teddy, are we in class? Anna, are we in class? You can use your mic to communicate. Are we understanding? Okay, so okay. So we can proceed. Can we proceed? Yeah, some people I have not gotten an answer from them. Anna, are you in class? Evans, are you in class? Grace, are you in class? Evans, are you in class? Evans Kemani. Grace Jerry. Okay, so I can proceed. So in this case, maybe we can look at another scenario here. So this scenario that we have here, we can still come up with what you call the activity diagram. And what we need to understand is now we ignore all these actors. So here we are not interested with the actor. Here we are interested with these functions. And if you look at this question, the library must keep track of the books as. So we can have a start, then we say keep track of the books. Then after we keep track, what else can you do? So if you look at this procedure that we have already written here, are the ones that we are supposed to come up with an activity diagram. I don't want to do some analysis on this and say maybe you have already understood, unless maybe I give you or I post a question that you can give me actors so that we can be able to understand. So for this case, we need to understand that the activity diagrams can also use what you call the swim lines. And the moment we are using the swim lines, we say they tell you what happens, but they do not tell you what to do or what how you did it. So the only thing that you need to look at in swim lines, that means that you can be able to convey different presentations in departmental level. And that's why we are saying once the characteristic of an activity diagram is that they tell you what happens, but they do not tell you what does what. This means that the diagram does not convey which people or departments are responsible for each activity. So in this case, we can say, let's try to create some groups of different communications. And this different communication is where we can say, this is group X, this is group Y. So we can use those swim lines. But in most cases, we don't use swim lines because now when you are using swim lines is when you are trying to create some groups. We say there is a group for students, there is a group for registering, there is a group for that, etc. So that's why we are saying a way around this is to use what is referred to as swim lines, which combines the activity diagrams, depiction of logic with interaction diagrams, depiction of the responsibility. And that's why we can say if activity A, B, C, D was supposed to be performed at the same time, let's combine it at once. You present it at once through the use of what you call the swim lines. So for this case, I have already given out the advantages and disadvantages of activity diagrams. And I would pause at that point, or maybe we will end at that point, because you have already exhausted 80 minutes, and 80 minutes maybe we need to create an awareness whether we have understood of what we have covered, so that next time we'll be able to do another scenario before we move to others for use case, and maybe we draw it. Then after drawing it, then we can be able now to understand it. Then after we understand it, I will give you an assignment that you are supposed to do. Then after doing that, we will be able now to go to the other diagram. So next week, I'm expecting maybe I can complete on coming up with a scenario. Then we draw an activity diagram. We try to understand it. Then after understanding it, then we can go to dynamic modeling. But what I can urge you is I will post a question that you're supposed to try for these minutes that are remaining, or these hours that are remaining. Remember, the class is supposed to end at 5, but it is 3:47. So I'm letting you now to give me all the actors, or maybe to come up with the activity diagrams, given that we have a scenario that I will post in that portal. Then after that, maybe we can go to the next one. Diagram that we are supposed to go to, which is dynamic. So we are almost ending with our UML diagrams. Remember, we have already covered 2 diagrams. We are remaining with 7. So when we cover next week 2, we will be remaining with 5. So I'm expecting maybe we will have that revision of those diagrams using some softwares that I will be able to maybe to give you a hand to use them. And we will be using Visio as a software. So is there any question up to that point? Am I allowed to move to the portal to post a question that you're supposed to do for those remaining time? Then we create a discussion for those questions that you have done at that time. Am I allowed to move to the next session? Okay, majority has responded. So can we move to the portal? Give me 5 minutes. I'll post that question. I think you can give me 5 minutes. So we can start that from 3:55. And please, I'm urging you, any cut or any exam or anything that we do in this platform, whether it is a quiz, we must do it because we are still using those marks. We are grading. So that will be a determinant whether you will do the end term exam. So if you not have done anything that I have already posted in this platform, maybe we will have an issue. Remember this, we are using a system. I cannot have faith in it and I say maybe I can have mercy on you. And then I say I will give you a takeaway card. No. So please make sure that you do everything, so that now after you do everything, we will be able now to grade you accordingly. Yes, Doreen, I can see you are typing. I'm waiting for that. Okay. Do you have any question? Anybody with a question? Doreen, yes. Do you have a question? I can see you are typing. Okay. Doreen, kwa nini unataka kupotea bana? Yes, I can understand. Okay. It will still be provided, but I would urge you to do it. If you can do it at this time, you do it, please. It will still be provided on that platform, but if you can do it, please do it at this time, because you still have a discussion. Yes, Pauline? Okay, let us move to the portal so that we can do that question.